The idea of the story of My Last Days as Roy Rogers came to me when I was visiting my mother and sister's home in Florence, Alabama, which is my hometown where I grew up. We were sitting around the table one morning several years ago, and we were talking about the current events of the day, and one thing that came up was the AIDS epidemic that had just come on the national scene, and everybody was scared to death of it. And I said to my mother and sisters, can you think of anything in our history that's absolutely panicked people like this? People were taking their children out of school, and they were scared to touch people that were HIV positive. It was ridiculous. And my sisters and I kind of thought and couldn't think of anything. My mother, of course, immediately said, oh, the polio summers of the late 40s and early 50s. They absolutely scared you witless, especially if you had young children, because you didn't know where it came from, you didn't know what caused it, you didn't know how to prevent it. And those summers were absolutely terrifying for people. I thought, she began to tell me stories about it, and I thought, you know, I think she's exaggerating a little bit. But that afternoon, and on several subsequent visits, I went to the archives of the library at the University of North Alabama, and I began to scroll back through the old newspapers of that period. And sure enough, there were, in the summer, article after article after article about polio and what people could try to do to avoid it, and all these other homemade cures that people would come up. And then there were also lists of people who were coming down with it every summer. And a special hospital was set up in the summer to handle the polio cases, and special nurses were brought in to handle the polio cases. So I became fascinated with that aspect and thought, wouldn't it be interesting to write a book with that background, that period background, but not from the viewpoint of the adult, because it would make it look too maudlin, but from the viewpoint of the child who's just trying to get through her summer and cope with the closing of the movies and the closing of the pools and everything else that closed down then. So that's where it came from.